This week, we're going to be looking at the golden key, how you use the eye of your imagination and the secret to denying your senses and your 3D world, how you as God are creating all the time, and why and how you can create as God. Welcome to the Inner Work Mastery channel with me, Fazila Bijo, where each week I help you explore, understand, and put into practice teachings for reality creation and manifestation. This week's video contains a lot of Neville's teachings, and it's multi-layered for us to really become aware of how we can create using the inner senses. We will be discussing how you can access the golden key using the power of our imagination, how we can embody the desires that we would love to have. This week's case study talks us through how we can elevate another in terms of any health issues they may be facing. If you are wanting to help a loved one, a family member, even someone that you don't know, this would be the case study you can follow along with so that you can revise their state of health. So join me in terms of expanding your consciousness around self-mastery. Let's get into the details of why Neville calls this the golden key. Last week's video talked about mental penetration of the senses. Most people will use ordinary consciousness or their perceptual senses and focus only on the data that their senses provide to them, which is bringing data from the outside into the internal world. Being a practitioner of the law of assumption, you know that you can shift things to as they ought to be. You must engage your senses fully in order to impress the subject with the object, which means that you must be able to go beyond your senses into the subconscious mind and penetrate your subconscious mind with the idea or the desire. And that way, you know as well that you must, for a while, deny what is outside of you in your 3D world. One of the key points in this chapter is about self-abandonment. And this is what Neville says is the secret to achieving and attaining your desires. In last week's video, I go into detail around all of these points. The one point that you must become aware of is that you must live inside the story. Because when you live as the person who has the desire, you must let the old die. You abandon the old state. You abandon any old ideas around not having a particular desire. You move from being the one who doesn't have to becoming the one who has. And therefore, I said this last week, when you live and you think from the new state, you will live as though you are the person who's in a movie. You must do this from the first person perspective, and you must always be physically present. Do not do this from the third person state. I'll talk a bit more about why this is so much like falling in love with your desire. Your desires have the plan and the expression of how it will come into being. So do not look to how, only look at what is it that you desire. In terms of self-abandonment, we must commit to self. So Neville says faith plus love equals self-commission, which means committing to the self to make that state alive. Committing yourself to making that state alive, to making your desire, your wish fulfilled, yours. You must become it. You must become the person who already lives and is the person who has that desire. And therefore, we must be the state in order to experience the state. When you drop into the quiet space, you will bring in the feeling that you have accepted that your desire is true. You have accepted that your desire is fully realized. Now, what you do need to do, though, is put yourself into a state of consciousness that has already achieved the desire, and that's where you bring the mood in. The mood will be the one of joy, of fulfillment, of satisfaction. Do not worry about the steps, because the steps are not up to you. So you would feel what you would feel when your desire is already realized. Not the steps, but the end of it. To illustrate this point, we will look at the following. Let's take the scenario of meeting someone that you actually fall in love with. Now, it is you alone that falls in love with them. You go on to get to know them, and you start to see this is the person you want to be with. And then you believe that they truly are the one. And then you live from that state of they are the only one for you. Then you decide you don't want to just date this person, and you decide you're going to marry them. Now, this is what Neville is talking about, is when you decide that that desire is yours, you have the belief, you have the faith, and you live from the conviction. This is the only thing for me. When you commit to yourself, you become the person who has that state. Faith says that you are so taken up with your conviction and your belief that that which you desire is yours alone. We come to love. Now, love is seeing only through the eyes of God, because we discover and we know that God within is I am. God is love. And when you experience yourself as love, you realize that we must do as God has done, which is God committed himself to us. And therefore, to experience the state that we wish to experience, we now imagine what it is like to commit to our creation. God has committed to man. God goes to sleep as man so that man may awake as God. And that awakeness, that journey of the awakeness is becoming aware that you are the creator of your reality. You create everything in this world. And that is what it means to be the imitator of God, is that we are to discover so that man may awaken to the level of presence of I am and realize that he is God. When you imitate God as a dear child, you will do that by having a controlled dream. And that controlled dream is going into the quiet space and stepping into your imaginal scene and making that imaginal scene real and vivid and takes on the feeling of naturalness and reality for you. You will ask no one. God does not take permission from anyone in terms of, is this right? Is this wrong? How should I do this? So too, you are to imitate God in that way, is you will not ask another. You will not look outside of you to see and validate, is this right or is this wrong? And all it takes is the desire for your life to be fully immersed, your life to be fully in this state of consciousness, totally as God has done, where God has committed himself to you. And so you make a wish and you possess it. You possess it in all the feeling, you possess it in all the tones of reality, you possess it through all your senses. And that's what it means to abandon self. You abandon the old self and you fully possess the new self. And you are meant to persist in this. Think of all of those patterns in your life that have been ongoing, which you do not like. It is because you have persisted in the thinking and the belief that it is true. You are conscious of being that. And so what you will do is abandon any thoughts and ideas, your inner conversations around that old state of consciousness. You are to revise it, and you're only to embody the new state. And when you love something, you commit to it. And so that is what you are to do. You commit to the new state of desire. In fact, when we fully have faith that we have what it is we desire, it's no longer new to us. It feels, it feels natural. It feels good. It has a feeling of fulfillment. It has a feeling of gratitude. And it gets to a point where you take it for granted. So when you get to a point where you no longer have to place your attention there voluntarily or consciously, you are starting to get to this point of it becoming natural for you. To shift the center of conscious imagining is to shift your attention or focus. So you change what you are aware of. You change what you've been aware of in the old consciousness and you only immerse yourself and you only embody. You feel it in your body what the new level of consciousness is. Live in the story. Think as the person in the story. Think only as the person who has the desire. Remember, you live in the movie. You live in the movie in your imaginal scene. You visit that maybe 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, and night. Definitely in the morning as you are coming out of sleep, and definitely in the evening as you go to sleep. Those are the times that you are able to impress your subconscious mind, impregnate your subconscious mind, go beyond the senses into the mental and the psychic and the conceptual capacities when the subconscious mind is amenable and accessible is when you're about to go to sleep or when you drop into the drowsy state. If we stop at our physical senses, it is a subjective barrier. We are looking at what our senses are saying and we believe that. We are not to stop at the level of senses. You must go into the level of your imagination. This is what the lady in this particular story today does. She let go of the old state and she experienced immediate and miraculous results. She said to Neville, "Thank you for the golden key." She said, "It has released my brother from hospital, from pain and possible death." Jo, the lady in question, said her brother was facing his 4th major operation with little hope of recovery. She was very concerned and she attempted to use what she had learned about her imagination. But she said, "I asked myself first what my brother truly desired." So remember, Neville says this as well. We must always start with what do we desire. But in this instance, Jo takes the golden rule into consideration and she asks herself, what would my brother truly desire? The question she asked was, does he want to continue in this body or does he desire to be free of it? She allowed herself to sit with that question. She said it revolved itself over and over in her mind. And then suddenly she knew that he would like to continue remodeling his kitchen, which he had been contemplating before confinement in hospital. I knew my question had been answered, so I began to imagine from that point. Attempting to see my brother in the very busy activity of remodeling, I suddenly found myself gripping the back of a kitchen chair I had used many times when something happened. Then suddenly I found myself beside my brother's bed in hospital. This was the last place I would have wanted to be, physically or mentally, but I was there, and my brother's hand reached up and clasped my hand tightly as I heard him say, "I knew you would come, Jo." It was a well hand I clasped, strong and sure, and the joy I felt spilled over in my voice as I heard myself say, "It's all better now. You know it." My brother didn't answer, but I distinctly heard a voice say to me, "Remember this moment." I seemed to awake then, back in my own home. This took place the night after he had entered the hospital. The following day, his wife telephoned me saying, "It is unbelievable. The doctor can't account for it, Jo, but no operation is necessary. He is so improved that they have agreed to release him tomorrow." The following Monday, my brother went back to his work and has been perfectly well since that day. JS. Neville says it is not facts, but the dreams of fancy that shapes our lives. JS needed no compass to find her brother when she saw herself in hospital by his bedside, nor did she need tools to operate for him to recover. She only needed the eye of imagination. And this is what he says. In the world of sense, we see what we have to see. But in the world of imagination, we see what we want to see. And seeing it, we create it for the world of sense to see it. When we do this, we see the outer world automatically from that which we have seen in our imagination. He does say that seeing what we want to see does demand voluntary and conscious, imaginative focus. Our future is our own imaginative activity that goes ahead and creates the physical world. And he says that while common sense assures us that we are living in a solid and sensible world, and that it's a seemingly solid world, but in reality, it is imaginal through and through. Nothing that is in creation was not first imagined. This is an extensive chapter as well. So please be sure to leave your comments and questions below, as well as your feedback in terms of how are you finding this particular chapter and how are you finding the series of videos. So this week's video is packed with so many more insights around how we can become the state of our desire, how we can change our consciousness to become the person who already has their desires. I will be wrapping up Through the Looking Glass in next week's video, so I will definitely be bringing in the teachings from these past two videos. Look out for that one. This is Fazila Bijo. Thank you for joining me, and I will catch you in the next video.